The bear was crying for help, but when the man discovered the reason, he was left frozen in terror. Deep in the wilderness of Yost National Park, a seasoned park ranger encounters something that stops him in his tracks. A massive grizzly bear, not as a predator, but as a desperate mother pleading for help. With every moment counting and a hidden danger lurking, what he discovers next is nothing short of astonishing. Stay with us as we unravel a story of courage, compassion, and an unbreakable bond between a man and the wild. Before we dive in, if you enjoy stories that inspire and move you, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Your support helps us bring more incredible tales to life.
The sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain of Yosemite National Park. John, a seasoned park ranger with a weathered face that mirrored the landscape he protected, traversed the winding trail with the familiarity of a lifelong companion. The scent of pine needles and damp earth filled his nostrils, a comforting aroma that always seemed to ground him, reminding him of his place in the grand tapestry of nature. He'd spent the better part of 2 decades patrolling these trails, each bend and vista etched into his memory. He knew the park like the back of his hand, its secrets whispered to him in the rustling leaves, the babbling brooks, and the calls of the wild. He wasn't just a ranger, he was a guardian, a silent observer of the delicate balance between man and nature. Today, however, the tranquility of the wilderness was pierced by an unfamiliar sound. It wasn't the chirping of birds or the rustling of squirrels, but a low, guttural moan that seemed to echo through the very trees themselves. John paused, his senses heightened, his hand instinctively reaching for the radio clipped to his belt. He scanned the surroundings, his eyes trained to spot the slightest movement. The forest held its breath, the usual symphony of nature hushed as if in anticipation. Then he saw it. A figure emerged from the thick undergrowth, lumbering towards him with a labored gait. It was a bear, a magnificent specimen of a grizzly, but something was amiss. The bear's usually imposing presence was replaced with an air of vulnerability. Its fur, typically sleek and glossy, was matted and dusty. Its movements, usually fluid and powerful, were slow and hesitant. And then there were the eyes. Those deep-set, intelligent eyes that usually held a spark of wildness were now filled with a desperate plea, a silent cry for help. John's heart pounded in his chest. He'd encountered bears countless times in his career, but he'd never witnessed such raw emotion in their eyes. He knew this was no ordinary encounter. Something was deeply wrong. As the bear drew closer, John noticed a dark stain on its flank, a crimson blotch against the brown fur. The bear, sensing his observation, slowly turned, revealing a deep gash on its side. The wound was raw, inflamed, and clearly causing the animal immense pain. A wave of empathy washed over John. He wasn't just looking at an injured animal. He was witnessing a creature in dire need, its life hanging in the balance. He knew he had to act, to offer aid to this majestic creature that had somehow crossed the boundary between wildness and vulnerability. He spoke softly, his voice a calming presence in the stillness of the forest. "Easy there, fella," he murmured, taking a slow, deliberate step forward. "Let me see." The bear, as if understanding his intent, lowered itself to the ground, its massive head resting on its paws. It whimpered softly, a sound that tugged at John's heartstrings. He knelt beside the bear, his movements gentle and reassuring. He reached out, his touch hesitant at first, then firm as he examined the wound. The gash was deep, the flesh torn and infected. John winced, imagining the pain the bear must be enduring. He knew he couldn't treat such a severe injury in the field. He needed to get this bear to the park's veterinary clinic, and fast. But how? Tranquilizing a bear of this size in its weakened state was risky. The terrain was rough, the journey back to the trailhead long and arduous. And then there was the question of the bear's cubs. John had noticed the swollen teats, a clear indication that this was a mother. Where were her young? Were they safe? The weight of responsibility settled on John's shoulders. He wasn't just dealing with an injured animal. He was dealing with a mother's life, a family's fate. He looked into the bear's eyes, those pools of pain and desperation, and made a silent vow. He would help this bear no matter the cost. The fading light cast an ethereal glow over the clearing, painting the towering pines in shades of purple and gray. John, his mind racing, assessed the situation. He knew he couldn't move the bear alone. She was far too large, and her injury too severe. He needed backup, and he needed it fast. Reaching for his radio, he contacted headquarters, his voice steady despite the urgency of the situation. Ranger Station, this is Ranger John, requesting immediate assistance. I have an adult female grizzly with a severe laceration, possibly infected. Location is approximately 2 miles south of Eagle Peak Trailhead. Requesting vet support and a transport team. The response was swift and reassuring. Copy that, Ranger John. We're dispatching a team now. ETA approximately 1 hour. Maintain visual contact with the bear, but do not attempt to approach or engage. Prioritize your safety. John acknowledged the instructions, a sense of relief washing over him. Help was on the way, but the next hour stretched before him like an eternity. He had to keep the bear calm, prevent her from wandering off or, worse, succumbing to her injuries. He spoke to her in a low, soothing voice, the kind of voice he might use to calm a frightened child. "Easy girl," he murmured, keeping a safe distance but maintaining eye contact. "Help is coming. Just hang in there." The bear, her breathing labored, seemed to understand. She lay still, her eyes fixed on John, a flicker of trust in their depths. He rummaged through his backpack, hoping to find something to offer her, some small comfort in her distress. He found a half-full bottle of water, a remnant from his earlier patrol. Approaching cautiously, he extended the bottle towards the bear. She watched him intently, her nostrils twitching, picking up his scent. Then, with a hesitant movement, she reached out, her massive paw gently taking the bottle from his hand. She lapped at the water gratefully, the cool liquid offering some respite from her pain and dehydration. As the minutes ticked by, John kept a vigilant watch over the bear, his senses alert to any changes in her condition or behavior. He observed her closely, noting the shallowness of her breathing, the occasional tremor that ran through her massive frame. He knew she was weakening, her body struggling to fight off infection and exhaustion. He thought about her cubs. Where were they? Were they nearby, hidden in the undergrowth, waiting for their mother's return? Or were they lost, alone and vulnerable? The thought of those cubs, helpless and alone, filled him with a sense of urgency. He had to find them, reunite them with their mother. But first, he had to ensure Hope's survival. He had to keep her alive until the rescue team arrived. He talked to her, telling her stories of the park, of the animals he'd encountered, of the beauty that surrounded them. He wanted to keep her conscious, to keep her fighting. As twilight deepened, casting long shadows across the forest floor, John heard the distant thrum of a helicopter. His heart leaped with hope. Help had arrived. He grabbed his flashlight, signaling the approaching aircraft, guiding them towards the clearing. The helicopter landed in a whirlwind of dust and leaves, its powerful searchlight illuminating the scene. A team of park rangers and a veterinarian rushed towards John, their faces etched with concern. "How is she?" Sarah, the park vet, asked, her voice filled with urgency. "Weak but stable," John replied, stepping aside to allow Sarah to examine the bear. Sarah worked quickly, assessing the wound, administering antibiotics and fluids. The bear, exhausted and in pain, submitted to the treatment, her eyes flickering between John and Sarah, a glimmer of gratitude in their depths. With the bear stabilized, the team carefully loaded her onto a stretcher, preparing to airlift her to the park's veterinary clinic. As they lifted her into the helicopter, John felt a pang of sadness, a sense of separation from this creature he had come to care for. But he knew this was the best chance for her survival. He watched the helicopter disappear into the night sky, carrying Hope towards safety. He knew his work wasn't over. He had a promise to keep, a family to reunite. He turned towards the darkening forest, his resolve strengthened. He would find those cubs. Dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold, casting a soft light over the wilderness. John, fueled by a strong cup of coffee and a renewed sense of purpose, set out to find Hope's cubs. He knew they couldn't be far from where he'd encountered their mother, their survival instincts likely keeping them close to their last known point of contact with her. He retraced his steps, his eyes scanning the forest floor for any sign of the cubs, tracks, scat, even a disturbed patch of leaves that might indicate their presence. He imagined them, small and vulnerable, huddled together for warmth and comfort, unaware of their mother's plight. The thought of them alone in the vast wilderness, exposed to predators and the elements, filled him with a sense of urgency. The forest, however, remained silent, its secrets well guarded. Hours passed, the sun climbing higher in the sky, casting long shadows that danced and shifted with the gentle breeze. John's initial optimism began to wane, replaced by a gnawing worry. Had the cubs wandered off? Had they fallen prey to a coyote or a bobcat? He pushed those thoughts aside, refusing to give in to despair. He had to find them, he had to believe they were out there, somewhere waiting to be reunited with their mother. He reminded himself of the resilience of nature, the inherent strength of these creatures, their ability to adapt and survive. He continued his search, venturing deeper into the wilderness, following animal trails, listening for the slightest sound, his senses on high alert. He climbed over fallen logs, waded through shallow streams, his boots sinking into the soft earth. The forest, once a place of tranquility, now seemed to hold its breath, its silence a heavy weight on his shoulders. Just as he was about to admit defeat, a faint sound reached his ears, a soft whimper, barely audible above the rustling leaves. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He strained his ears, listening intently, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound. He crept forward cautiously, his movements slow and deliberate, careful not to disturb the delicate balance of the forest. The whimpering grew louder, guiding him towards a thicket of ferns and bushes. He parted the foliage gently, his eyes widening as he spotted them. Two cubs, no bigger than house cats, huddled together beneath a fallen log. Their fur, a rich shade of cinnamon, blended perfectly with the forest floor. Their eyes, wide and innocent, stared up at him with a mixture of fear and curiosity. John's heart melted at the sight of them. They were so small, so vulnerable, yet so full of life. He knelt down slowly, extending his hand towards them, his voice a soft whisper. "It's okay, little ones," he murmured. "I'm here to help." The cubs, wary of this human intruder, retreated further into their hiding place. John remained patient, his movements gentle and reassuring. He spoke to them softly, telling them stories of their mother, of her strength and courage, of her love for them. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a handful of dried berries, offering them to the cubs. The cubs, driven by hunger and perhaps sensing his kindness, emerged cautiously from their hiding place. They sniffed the berries tentatively, their tiny noses twitching, before taking them from his hand. John smiled, his heart filled with relief. He had found them. Now he had to get them back to the clinic, to their mother, to complete the circle of care he had begun. With the cubs safely located, a new challenge arose, transporting them through the rugged terrain. John couldn't simply carry them in his arms. They were surprisingly strong, their tiny claws sharp, and their instinct to squirm and wriggle ever present. He needed a plan, a way to secure them safely while navigating the challenging landscape. He surveyed his surroundings, his eyes falling on his ranger jacket, discarded earlier in the heat of the search. An idea sparked in his mind. He carefully folded the jacket, creating a makeshift sling, and gently placed one of the cubs inside. The cub, initially startled, soon settled down, its warmth radiating through the fabric. The second cub proved a bit more challenging. John, reluctant to leave it behind, decided to improvise. He carefully opened his backpack, creating a cozy space within, and gently placed the cub inside. He left the top slightly open, allowing the cub to peek out, its curious eyes taking in the world from its new vantage point. With his precious cargo secured, John began the arduous journey back to the trailhead. The terrain was uneven, the path strewn with rocks and fallen branches. He moved slowly, carefully placing each step, mindful of the delicate creatures he carried. The cubs, initially whimpering with fear, gradually settled into the rhythm of his movement. The gentle swaying of the sling, the warmth of his body, and the occasional reassuring pat seemed to soothe them. They grew quiet, their eyes wide with curiosity as they observed the world from their unique perspectives. The journey was slow, the weight of the cubs adding to the physical exertion. John's muscles ached, his breath coming in ragged gasps, but he pressed on, driven by the image of hope awaiting her young, the thought of their reunion fueling his determination. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the forest floor, John finally reached the trailhead. A wave of relief washed over him as he saw the familiar sight of the park ranger's vehicle. He carefully removed the cubs from their makeshift carriers, placing them in a secure transport crate provided by the waiting rangers. He watched as the vehicle departed, carrying the cubs towards the veterinary clinic, towards their mother. He felt a sense of accomplishment, a quiet satisfaction in knowing he had played a part in their rescue. Exhausted but exhilarated, John leaned against his own truck, taking a moment to catch his breath. He closed his eyes, replaying the events of the day, the encounter with Hope, the search for the cubs, the challenging journey back. He felt a deep connection to these creatures, a sense of responsibility for their well-being. He knew his work wasn't over. He would visit the clinic, check on their progress, and ensure their safe return to the wild. He had become their guardian, their protector, a silent observer of their journey back to freedom. The veterinary clinic, a sanctuary of healing nestled amidst the wilderness, hummed with a quiet energy. John, after a much-needed shower and a change of clothes, made his way to the observation room overlooking the bear enclosure. He felt a mix of anticipation and trepidation, eager to witness the reunion between Hope and her cubs, yet apprehensive about their condition. Sarah, the veterinarian, greeted him with a warm smile. "John, you're just in time," she said, leading him towards the window. "Hope's been quite restless, sensing her cubs are near." John peered into the enclosure, his heart swelling with emotion. Hope, her wounds cleaned and bandaged, lay on a bed of soft straw, her eyes filled with a longing that mirrored his own. The cubs, nestled in a separate enclosure nearby, whimpered softly, their tiny paws reaching out towards their mother. The moment of reunion was nothing short of magical. As the cubs were carefully introduced into the enclosure, Hope's demeanor transformed. She rose to her feet, her maternal instincts taking over, her eyes softening with a tender love. The cubs, sensing their mother's presence, rushed towards her, their tiny bodies wiggling with excitement. Hope enveloped them in a warm embrace, her deep purrs resonating through the room. The cubs nuzzled against her, their tiny paws kneading her fur, their whimpers replaced with contented sighs. John watched the scene unfold, his own eyes welling up with tears. He had witnessed the raw power of nature, the unbreakable bond between mother and offspring, the resilience of life in the face of adversity. Over the next few days, John became a fixture at the clinic. He spent hours observing the bears, studying their interactions, marveling at their resilience. He learned to distinguish the cubs, their personalities as distinct as their physical markings. Scout, the bolder of the two, was always exploring, venturing further from his mother's side, his curiosity insatiable. Willow, the more cautious one, preferred to stay close to Hope, her eyes wide with wonder as she observed her brother's adventures. John's presence seemed to have a calming effect on the bears. Hope, initially wary of humans, grew to trust him. She would often approach the edge of the enclosure, allowing John to gently scratch her behind the ears. The cubs, too, seemed to enjoy his company, their playful antics often directed at him. He found himself drawn to their resilience, their ability to adapt and thrive despite the trauma they had endured. He saw in them a reflection of the wilderness itself, its ability to heal, to regenerate, to endure. He felt a deep connection to these creatures, a sense of shared experience that transcended language. One afternoon, as John sat observing the bears, Sarah approached him with a thoughtful expression. "John," she began, "we're planning to release Hope and her cubs back into the wild soon. We're looking for someone to monitor their progress, to ensure they're adapting well. Someone who understands their needs, their connection to this place." John's heart leaped at the offer. "I'd be honored," he replied, his voice filled with sincerity. The prospect of being involved in their return to the wild filled him with a sense of purpose. He felt a responsibility towards these bears, a desire to protect them, to ensure their successful reintegration into their natural habitat. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to do everything in his power to help them thrive. The days leading up to the release were a flurry of activity. John immersed himself in preparations, studying maps of the release site, consulting with wildlife experts, and familiarizing himself with the bears' individual needs. He felt a sense of responsibility, a weight on his shoulders, but also a deep sense of purpose. The chosen location was a secluded valley, nestled deep within the park, far from human settlements and disturbances. It was a pristine wilderness, teeming with life, a perfect habitat for a family of bears seeking a fresh start. John visited the site several times, scouting the terrain, identifying potential food sources, and ensuring the absence of any threats. He also spent countless hours with Hope and her cubs, observing their behavior, learning their individual quirks, and strengthening the bond he had formed with them. He talked to them, sharing stories of the wilderness, preparing them for the challenges and wonders that awaited them. The day of the release arrived, a mix of excitement and apprehension hanging in the air. John, along with Sarah and a team of park rangers, accompanied the bears to the release site. The journey was filled with a quiet anticipation, a sense of shared purpose, and a deep respect for the creatures they were entrusted with. As the transport trailer doors opened, Hope emerged cautiously, her cubs trailing behind her. They paused for a moment, taking in the sights and smells of their new home. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. The sun filtered through the canopy of trees, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. With a sudden burst of energy, Hope led her cubs into the undergrowth, disappearing into the dense foliage. John watched them go, a bittersweet feeling washing over him. He had grown attached to these bears, and the thought of saying goodbye was difficult. But he knew this was where they belonged, in the wild, living free. His role now shifted from caregiver to guardian. He would monitor their progress, ensuring their successful adaptation to their new environment. He would be their silent protector, a watchful presence in the shadows, intervening only when necessary. He set up a remote observation post, equipped with binoculars and a camera, allowing him to track their movements without disturbing their natural behavior. He spent hours each day observing them, documenting their interactions, their hunting techniques, their playful explorations. He witnessed their remarkable resilience, their ability to adapt and thrive in the wilderness. Hope, a skilled hunter and protector, taught her cubs the ways of the wild. The cubs, quick learners, thrived under her guidance. They learned to fish in the crystal-clear streams, forage for berries in the sun-drenched meadows, and climb trees with the agility of seasoned climbers. John watched them flourish, his heart swelling with pride. He felt a deep connection to these creatures, a sense of shared purpose in protecting their freedom. He was no longer just a park ranger. He was the guardian of the valley, the protector of Hope and her cubs, a silent witness to their journey back to the wild. Summer gave way to autumn, painting the valley in a breathtaking tapestry of golds, reds, and browns. The air grew crisp, carrying the scent of decaying leaves and damp earth. Hope and her cubs, now almost fully grown, had thrived in their wild haven. John, observing them from his hidden post, marveled at their transformation. They were no longer the vulnerable creatures he had rescued. They were confident, capable predators, masters of their domain. One morning, as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the morning mist, John noticed an unusual tension in the air. The forest, usually alive with the sounds of birdsong and rustling leaves, was eerily silent. A sense of unease settled over him, a primal instinct warning him of an impending disturbance. He scanned the valley with his binoculars, his eyes searching for any sign of Hope and her cubs. They were nowhere to be seen. He strained his ears, listening for any sound that might betray their presence. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the occasional gust of wind whistling through the trees. Driven by a growing sense of dread, John decided to investigate. He packed his gear, his senses on high alert, and ventured into the valley, following the faint trails left by the bears. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the usual symphony of nature replaced by an unsettling quiet. As he ventured deeper into the wilderness, he stumbled upon a sight that made his blood run cold. A group of men, their faces obscured by camouflage paint, were setting traps and snares along the bears' frequented paths. Their movements were swift and practiced, their eyes glinting with a predatory gleam. John's heart pounded in his chest. Poachers. He recognized the telltale signs of their illegal trade, the cruel traps designed to maim and capture, the sacks filled with animal pelts and bones. A wave of anger washed over him, a fierce protectiveness for the bears he had come to care for. He knew he had to act, to protect Hope and her cubs from these ruthless intruders. But he was outnumbered, outgunned. He needed backup, but contacting the rangers would take time, precious time that the bears might not have. He decided to confront the poachers, to stall them, to buy time for the authorities to arrive. He stepped out from behind a thicket of trees, his voice booming through the silent forest. "This is protected land," he shouted. "Leave now or face the consequences." The poachers, startled by his sudden appearance, turned towards him with menacing glares. One of them, a burly man with a scarred face and cold eyes, sneered at John. "And who's gonna stop us, old man?" he growled, his hand resting on the rifle slung across his shoulder. John stood his ground, his voice unwavering. "I am," he declared, his eyes locking with the poachers. He knew he was risking his life, but the thought of Hope and her cubs falling victim to these men fueled his courage. A tense standoff ensued. The poachers, caught off guard, hesitated. John, despite the fear gnawing at him, held his ground, his resolve strengthened by his love for the bears. He knew he had to buy time, to keep them occupied until help arrived. He engaged them in a conversation, appealing to their sense of reason, reminding them of the laws they were breaking, the consequences they would face. He spoke of the beauty of the wilderness, the sanctity of life, the importance of preserving the delicate balance of nature. His words seemed to have little effect on the hardened poachers, but they bought him precious time. In the distance, he heard the faint sound of approaching sirens. The poachers, realizing they were trapped, abandoned their equipment and fled into the dense forest. John watched them disappear, his heart pounding in his chest. He had faced danger, risked his own life to protect the bears. He had fulfilled his promise, his responsibility to Hope and her cubs. As the park rangers arrived, apprehending the fleeing poachers, John returned to his observation post. He scanned the valley, his heart filled with anxiety. Where were Hope and her cubs? Had they witnessed the confrontation? Were they safe? Relief washed over him as he saw them emerge from a hidden den, their eyes wide with curiosity but unharmed. Hope, sensing his presence, approached him, her eyes filled with gratitude. She nuzzled him gently, a gesture of thanks from one protector to another. John, his heart filled with emotion, reached out and stroked her fur, a silent promise to continue watching over them, to ensure their safety in this wild and sometimes dangerous world. He knew their story was far from over, but he also knew they were strong, resilient, and capable of facing any challenge that came their way. Winter descended upon the valley, blanketing the landscape in a pristine layer of white. The air grew still and silent. The once vibrant forest hushed beneath the weight of the snow. Hope and her cubs, their coats thick and lustrous, adapted to the changing season, their instincts guiding them through the challenges of winter survival. John, bundled in layers of warm clothing, continued his vigil, his presence a comforting constant in their lives. He tracked their movements, observing their strategies for finding food and shelter in the harsh conditions. He marveled at their resilience, their ability to thrive even in the face of adversity. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a rosy glow over the snow-covered landscape, John witnessed a scene that etched itself into his memory. Hope, her cubs nestled beside her, stood atop a rocky outcrop, their silhouettes outlined against the fiery sky. They seemed to embody the very spirit of the wilderness, their strength and grace a testament to the enduring power of nature. John felt a profound sense of connection to these creatures, a kinship forged through shared experiences and mutual respect. He had witnessed their vulnerability, their resilience, their unwavering spirit. He had played a part in their journey, a small but significant role in their return to the wild. As the days grew shorter and the nights longer, John found himself reflecting on his own life, his purpose, his connection to the natural world. He had spent his career protecting the wilderness, but it was through his encounter with Hope and her cubs that he truly understood its power, its fragility, its enduring beauty. He realized that his role as a park ranger extended beyond enforcing regulations and ensuring visitor safety. He was a guardian, a protector, a steward of the land and its inhabitants. He was a voice for the voiceless, a champion for the wild creatures that called this place home. Spring arrived, bringing with it a renewed sense of hope and vitality. The snow melted, revealing the vibrant green shoots of new life. The forest awoke from its winter slumber, its symphony of sounds filling the air once more. Hope and her cubs emerged from their winter den, their coats sleek and shiny, their eyes sparkling with renewed energy. They explored their familiar territory, their movements filled with a newfound confidence and maturity. John watched them with a sense of pride and accomplishment. He had witnessed their transformation, their growth, their journey back to the wild. He knew they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, their spirits strong, their instincts sharp, their bond unbreakable. One day, as John sat observing the bears from his hidden post, he noticed a change in their behavior. Hope, her cubs now almost fully independent, seemed to be preparing them for a new chapter in their lives. She led them on longer excursions, teaching them advanced hunting techniques, encouraging them to explore new territories. John understood. The time had come for the cubs to venture out on their own, to establish their own territories, to continue the cycle of life. He felt a pang of sadness, a sense of loss, but also a deep sense of joy. He had witnessed their journey, their growth, their transformation. He had played his part, and now it was time to let go. He watched as the cubs, with a mixture of excitement and trepidation, ventured out into the wilderness, their mother's watchful eyes following their every move. He knew they would face challenges, but he also knew they were equipped to handle them. They were wild, they were free, and they carried within them the enduring spirit of their mother, the legacy of hope. John remained in the valley, his presence a comforting constant in the ever-changing landscape. He continued his work, protecting the wilderness, ensuring the safety of its inhabitants. But he cared.
And so, the grizzly bear and her cubs found hope in a world where survival is never guaranteed, thanks to one man's determination to make a difference. If you enjoyed this story of courage and compassion, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification bell so you never miss another inspiring tale. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.